Hello again. In this video, let's follow a train from the easternmost end of the railroad, which currently is Deschutes Junction, up to Sherman Butte. We'll be traveling across the Deschutes River, which is that ridge coming up just ahead of us. After we go through the tunnel, we'll be coming out in an area I call the roller coaster. There have been times when I was rail fanning when I saw the trains going up and down over a series of low hills. The hills really were too small to be called hills, but they're also very close together, so the entire train tends not to be on a grade at the same time, so sometimes they put more grade in there than you'd normally find in a place where the grade was prolonged, because the train doesn't have to compensate for it. Well, I think it's kind of cool watching the train negotiate the gradients. You can see it sort of bobbing up and down here and there as it goes through them. Well, we're almost across the Deschutes River. If we followed the Deschutes River heading away from us, we'd come to the town of Redland on the Deschutes branch. This part of the countryside is pretty arid out here, high desert area. The train's being led by a pair of Southern Pacific Type SP 410-2 locomotives. These locomotives are unusual in that they have 3 cylinders. There's one cylinder on each side and a third one between the axles. This made them difficult to maintain, and they were also somewhat stiff, so the Southern Pacific crews didn't really like them that much. But JR made a couple of great models of them, and I thought, well, that'd be just the thing for me. This area of the railroad alternates between farm fields and desolation. You can see that we're starting into the roller coaster area here. The train's on a little bit of an upgrade, and by we'll crest a hill and start back down again. So there's the hill we're cresting. Up ahead of us, we're going to be coming to a place where a creek or a river has cut a big rut in the ground, and we call that Last Canyon here on the Bear Creek. Those mountains ahead of us, where the track starts heading up through Roberts Creek, going all the way up to the summit. And we're coming up on Last Canyon here. I make all of my terrain by hand, and turns out that this kind of terrain is surprisingly tricky to model. So I started off by laying the track, then I adjusted elevations on the track up and down and up and down and up and down, I created the sub-road bed under the track, which followed the track's contours. And then I used the set terrain to elevation tool, picking up the elevation from the track sub-road bed and making ribs that go off at 90 degrees to either side of the track. I made a lot of ribs going out, and then I used the plateau tool to try to smooth between the ribs. But the plateau tool really isn't a smoother by, technically it's supposed to set all the terrain to the elevation of where you pointed at when you started it. And so it's a little tricky to get things really smooth. I sure wish that N3V would put a real smoothing tool into the surveyor interface. But if you work at it and work at it and work at it, well, I worked at it, I managed to get things smoothed out, and there are places where the hills were too high or too low, and so I ended up doing a fair bit of tweaking there. The theory here is that the hill should be a little higher than the high point of the track and a little lower than the low point of the track, because they dig away as much from where the hill is high to correspond with what they need to fill in where the ground is low and the track's above it. Now, looking back to where we came from, it's pretty easy to see there's not a whole lot there. I tried modeling this area just a couple of board squares wide, but it was too easy to see the edges of the world that way, so I expanded it out considerably. Once we get across this road, and there really aren't any paved roads out here in the middle of nowhere in the 1950s, all the roads are gravel roads. Anyhow, once we get across the road, we'll be out of the farm area into basically high desert with just nothing much around except sagebrush and some runt trees and bushes that manage to grow. I mean, it's not completely devoid of moisture, but it's not very wet either. You won't find Douglas firs growing out here. Well, you can see what I mean about the terrain here. There's not many big trees out here at all, and the grass out here is mostly turned yellow because it didn't have enough moisture to keep it green. I tried modeling a dry wash and didn't come out too badly. But if there was a good rainstorm going on up in those hills, I wouldn't recommend standing in that wash because you're likely to see a wall of water come down at you. Maybe those dead trees just look too much like each other, so I should probably get those out of there and put something new in. I don't know if you caught it or not, but the background mountains, the right edge of them, I mean not the ones that are here right behind the train, but the ones that are way in the distance, you could sort of see where the edge of the mountains was, and that's one of the problems you have when you're going from flat ground to mountain terrain. You have to think in terms of sightlines. What will people be able to see? Because seeing the side of a board square doesn't look very realistic. So I tackle that two ways. One, I take the board squares where the mountains are, and I try to take the outside edges of those and bring the terrain down really low and then color it so you don't get a look at the gray that's the normal color of the board square sides. And then I try to put progressively higher hills and low mountains in between us and where the tall mountains are. Those high tension wires are a clue that there might be life out there somewhere. Though there's not much here. It wasn't for the track and the row of telephone poles, this place would look pretty much like the middle of nowhere. However, there is some stuff going on out here. We're coming up on another road crossing the track, and then there'll be a road paralleling the track on the left, and another one paralleling the track on the right. It's almost like we're downtown or something. I live in Oregon. It's on the west coast of the United States. And there's a railroad there called the Portland and Western. And they have some track that runs along the Tualatin Valley Highway between Beaverton and Hillsboro. And there's an area there they call the roller coaster where the track's going up and down and up and down. Of course there it's not this desolate or arid. There's houses and buildings and people everywhere, and quite a bit of rain in the winter. Well, we passed that last set of farm fields, and here we are going back into desolation again. And there's a bit of a farm over there beyond the train. As we get closer to them, the hills definitely seem to be getting a bit bigger. They mark the end of the roller coaster, and then we'll go into, well, on the other side of those hills. We'll have to go through a tunnel to get there, but on the other side we'll catch the lower part of Roberts Creek. Previous video showed upper Roberts Creek, and this is very much lower Roberts Creek we'll be transitioning into. This is tunnel 7 we're coming up on once we get around this curve. As we get out of the tunnel, we'll be going across Roberts Creek on another worn truss bridge. Now, the upper Roberts Creek area is toast. The route file for that got corrupted and it isn't stable, so I can't build on it. I'm losing all the detailed terraforming I did up there, the texturing and a lot of planting and stuff. But I do have a stable version that includes this terrain, so I'm not going to be losing this. And you're probably noticing those unsightly cracks underneath the ballast. Well, it's a dilemma, I tell you, because if I use a non-PBR texture, which is much better at getting rid of cracks, then the turf effects have a funny interaction when transitioning between non-PBR and PBR textures. And so that's no good, but if I use a PBR texture underneath the track, then you get this effect with the normal tracks that's, well, the cracks show up. So procedural track would seem to be the answer, but the examples of procedural track I've seen don't appeal to me very much. The ties are too skinny, they're too far apart, and the ballast looks like it was milled on a CNC machine. It just doesn't look real at all. So I've been sticking with the JR track and just dealing with the cracks. If I put non-PBR texturing underneath the track, I'd have to go way out to the side before I could start putting PBR texture on, and then if I tried to bring the turf effects up close to the track, there would be all sorts of artifacts because there's some sort of interaction there if you've got dissimilar texture types and cover it with turf effect. I'm hoping that N3V will be able to get that taken care of, but I'm not holding my breath on it. So there's a little creek that runs off to the side here underneath this bridge. Seems like there's a lot of worn trusses out here. And you can see there's a track that runs up the creek, and that's going to the Itza mine. So I haven't decided yet what the Itza mine produces, some sort of ore or something. Maybe iron ore, maybe, I don't know, I'll figure out something. But that's where that track's going. And I've got video shot to do a tutorial on detailing a mountain creek, one that isn't flat, that goes up. Using the creek splines, and the real problem is getting the creek bed to be flat, because you can't take a spline and set a grade to it. It's really tough to carve a creek bed by hand. So I lay track through where I want the creek to go, and then I set the sub-road bed to the track height using the S command in Surveyor, and then I lay the creek splines right on top of that, then go back and then hit every creek spine vertex point with the height adjustment. I don't actually adjust the height, I just click on it, and that tells it to hold its elevation. Then I come by using the plateau tool or using a down tool from the F1 part of Surveyor and excavate underneath it to make room for the water underneath it. Then you paint the bottom of the creek with the blue color, and it starts looking like water. And now you've got the creek splines that are going up at whatever grade you used when you set the track in place. So I think I was using like a 1% grade most of the way up, or 1.5% grade maybe it was, to go up to the Itza mine. So this is Sherman Butte, thriving metropolitan downtown Sherman Butte. There's not much of it though. Sherman Butte's more of a water stop place and a passing track than anything else. If you want to get out of Sherman Butte by vehicle, then you need to take that really snaky road up over the hill and through the pass up there. I think I see some foam poles that need to be position adjusted. You know, I thought I had this track ready for video, but yikes. Doesn't matter how many times you quality check something, it's always something that slips through. Anyway, I guess that's about it for our little tour through the roller coaster. So hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next video maybe. Bye now.